Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel where today we are finally, and I do mean finally, getting round to the Everqueen Part 2. I still have not finished painting this miniature. I don't know what it is. I love this miniature. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It means so much to me, but it's been so hard since the new year to get back into the headspace to actually paint her. But I have been slowly editing down the footage of a year's worth of painting. So I've painted her pretty much for every week of the year 2021, not 2021, 2022, and at least 3 weeks of 2023. So I have a lot of footage to kind of edit down. And it takes a while because each section of footage is at least 2 hours. So yeah, you're looking at least, I think there's 8 hours worth of footage where I actually painted the Everqueen, because I've cut out all of the characters that I paint in between while I'm waiting for layers to dry. So all the zombies and the zombivers and the zombicide characters, I've cut out all of that and I've literally just shown you me painting the Everqueen, which was a request of one of my Patreons, Lloyd, also known as Fish Jam. Now, last time I gave you a little bit of information, sorry Loki's trying to get involved, about the Everqueen herself, and today I'm going to just read to you the Warhammer Wiki Alarielle the Everqueen kind of entry, because it's got a lot more information than I remember. I'm very much a Dark Elf player, and if you know anything about Warhammer, Dark Elves, Wood Elves and High Elves don't get on. At some point in my life, I've collected all of them, High Elves, Wood Elves and Dark Elves, but Dark Elves were predominantly the ones that I used and fought with because they had the most female units. It seems really silly, but as a woman I find that really important that you have representation, which is also why I now have a lot of Daughters of Cain models, because they're some of the very few feminine models within the Age of Sigmar or even Warhammer 40k. I was really upset with Warhammer 40k because for a while they didn't even have the Sisters of Battle as an army that I could play. They have recently in the last 6-7 years, but I have refused to buy myself any more models, so I've painted all of the ones that I have, and I have hundreds of models to paint, so that's why they aren't here. So let's dive deep into Alarielle the Everqueen and go from there. So Alarielle is also called Alarielle the Radiant and Alarielle the Everqueen, which is the name that I have given her every time I've spoken to her, so I don't know why they kind of choose that as a different name, title, whatever you want to call it. She is the current Everqueen of the High Elves and the 11th to rule since the time of the Phoenix King Anarion, many thousands of years ago. So that just gives you an example of how old Malekith, the ruler of the Dark Elves and the one true heir to the High Elves, has been denied his birthright. It's kind of funny really when you think about it in the end, and she has to marry him and she doesn't like him. It's really funny. Alarielle, like many of the previous Everqueens, represents the mortal embodiment of the chief priestess of Ishtar, the mother goddess of the entire elven race, and she is the spiritual heart of Ulthuan and beloved of the Azure, which is basically the High Elves. Okay? Her glowing hair is like a golden cloud, and it is said that so great and timeless is her beauty that it can move the immortal gods to tears. The Everqueen's power is that of nature itself. Where Alarielle walks, the fields start to blossom and the flowers spring forth from the ground. Which is kind of funny because the Wood Elves have the actual avatar of Ishtar as their main kind of... she's called Alarielle. Not Alarielle, she's called Ariel. Sorry, not Alarielle, Ariel. And she has these beautiful butterfly wings, and in the end time story she dies and transfers her final power over to Alarielle. So to that point, Alarielle is not actually the embodiment of Ishtar the goddess. She's just like her high priestess, which is kind of funny. It's also kind of interesting because you'll see that I have not painted Alarielle with the pale blonde hair that she has in lore. I've painted her with red hair. Now, red hair was given to me by my Twitch chat. I'm not going to lie, Twitch is amazing, and Twitch decided how I was going to paint this character. They chose the green of the dress, the red of the hair, the pale of the skin, the colour of the armour, and even the colour of we've affectionately named him Sir Humphrey, the giant beetle that she rides. So that's a deviation, and I kind of like the red hair a bit more. Red represents blood and life to me, more than the pale blonde, which kind of represents just... I'm not going to go into what it represents here, actually, because I just thought and went, that doesn't sound very good. But yeah, it's really strange. I don't like the blonde hair on Alarielle. White, maybe. Red, definitely. Brown, even. Or green, but not white or blonde. I don't think that fits her as a character. When Alarielle is joyful, the skies above become clear and the land for leagues around blooms with life and light. When she mourns, the skies weep with her, and when her eyes darken with rage, thunder roars across the hills. You know what? I think this actually fits pretty well with what they're going for in the Age of Sigmar, and yes, this works very, very well for her. Since the Golden Age, the Everqueen has served as Isha's chosen priestess in the mortal world, whilst the tradition of the crowning of the Phoenix King is relatively new for the High Elves. If you think 5,000 to 6,000 years is new, a mere 6,500 years in age, there has always been an Everqueen ruling the enchanted Isles of Ulthuan. So yeah, essentially, they messed up when it came to Marathi and Malekith and Atharion, and things went very wrong, and for 6,500 years they've been trying to deal with that shit, whereas she's been doing her job for however many years, and the Everqueens have just been doing what she should, which is great. Alarielle, however, was born as the child of the previous Everqueen, Estriel, and the Phoenix King of Ulthuan. It's really weird that they don't name as many Phoenix Kings as they do Everqueens, so maybe the Everqueens are much more important than the Phoenix Kings, which would be pretty cool, let's be honest. As a High Elven tradition dictated, she was separated from her mother at birth and was swept into a far-off and hidden place from which she grew up in secrecy. Both kind of cool and also very sad. When her mother died by poison delivered by the assassin Urien Poisonblade, Alarielle eventually came out of hiding and was to be presented at Avalon to be crowned as the next Everqueen. Though still young in terms of an elven lifespan, Alarielle was destined to lead her people during an invasion the likes of which had never been seen since the great sundering of the ancient times. This was known as the Dark Elf invasions, which is technically really funny because the person leading those invasions was her future husband. How funny is that? The Dark Elven invasion. During the time of the Great War against Chaos, the crowning of Alarielle marked the beginning of the Dark Elven Witch King Malekith's invasion of Ulthuan. From the north, the Dark Elves swept through Ulthuan, looting, burning and pillaging, as they do because you made them do that to survive. Allied with the servants of the four major ruinous powers of chaos, they seemed unstoppable, the gigantic black arcs of Naggaroth vomiting forth a wave of corruption onto the shores of the High Elf lands. The reason I find this very amusing is the reason that the black arcs are the way they are. There is a part of the island of Ulthuan that was called Nagrond, which is where the Dark Elves come from. The High Elves decided that they were going to sink this land and the cities underneath the water to essentially drown their kin that were, like, there was a civil war, and instead of dealing with this in a decent manner, they decided to just drown everybody, man, woman or child, and the Dark Elves struck out by creating the Black Arcs. So the Black Arcs are essentially the cities of Nagrond that have been magically created into floating cities that are transported around the world by giant leviathans, which are essentially, in the Warhammer world, sea dragons, which I think is really cool. Ships of rune-woven red iron brought frenzied chaos warriors to Ulthuan, and the Witchkin of Naggaroth once more set foot on the land from where he'd so long ago been driven. Everywhere, the unprepared High Elves suffered defeat after defeat at the hands of their chaos-worshipping kin. That's not true. The Dark Elves do not worship the Chaos gods. They worship Cain, who is another member of the Elven gods, along with Isha. So they can't really say that, can they? In the lands of men, things went no better. The shattered empire, long a cauldron of factional strife, could not stand against the tide of chaos. It was a time of blood and darkness, and the world was ending in death and despair. I mean, this is a very stereotypical, like, fantasy world, not just Warhammer, so, you know, I don't particularly see this as an issue right now. The warrior prince Tyrion of Kothik was in Avalon at the court of Alariel, the newly crowned Everqueen, when the Dark Elves came. The thunderous voices of their beasts filled the ancient woods. The shrill blasts of their brazen trumpets echoed triumphantly through the heart of the land, and hurriedly the maiden guard of the Queen moved to meet the threat of their lady. A hastily assembled force of warriors was thrown into battle, but to no avail. The Dark Elves were too strong, and it looked as if the Everqueen, the spiritual leader of Ulthuan, would fall into their clutches. And in desperation, Tyrion pulled her from her silk pavilion. And cut a bloody path clear of the massacre, slaying any Dark Elf that got in his way. So I think this is a pretty good point to leave this. I still have so much of the Everqueen to paint and to show you. So we're going to leave her being rescued by her knight in shining armor, the elven prince Tyrion, who is the nephew of her future husband, Malekith, the true Phoenix King. I want you to bear all of this in mind as we go through the story, that Malekith is supposed to be her true husband and that she fell in love with her nephew. It's all a bit weird in Warhammer Fantasy, but it's very fun. As always, if you have enjoyed this video, please do like, share, comment and subscribe. We will see you next time, and once again, thank you so much to Lloyd for requesting this video. Take care everybody, have fun, and we will see you next time. Take care and goodbye.